You wake up at 6 in the morning with a plan. You know exactly what needs to get done today. You have your list, you have your priorities, you have been here before. The morning version of yourself, fully ready, completely certain. And then something small happens. A message, a news alert, a conversation that goes sideways. And by noon, you are 3 hours deep into something you never intended to do. The original plan sitting somewhere beneath the noise, barely visible. And here is what is strange about that. You are not lazy, you are not disorganized, you are actually someone who thinks a lot, maybe too much. So why does this keep happening? Why do smart people, people who read, who plan, who genuinely try, why do they keep arriving at the same destinations they were trying to avoid? That is the question I want to sit with today. Not because the answer is simple, but because once you understand it, really understand it, the way you see your own decisions, your own reactions, your own daily patterns will never look quite the same again. There is something happening inside your mind right now that you are not fully aware of. It is not your thoughts exactly. It is more like the weather system behind your thoughts. The invisible current that decides which way your attention flows, which facts feel true, which choices feel obvious, before you have had any real chance to evaluate them. Most of us were never taught that this exists. We were taught to think harder, work harder, push through, gather more information, make more lists. But the problem was never the amount of thinking. The problem was the quality of it. Think about the last big decision you made, a job, a relationship, a financial move. You probably felt confident going in. You had reasons, good ones. And looking back now, you can see things you simply could not see then, even though the information was there. That is not a failure of intelligence. That is a feature of the way human minds actually work. The mind does not process reality directly. It processes a version of reality, filtered, shaped, and quietly distorted by patterns that formed long before you were old enough to question them. Patterns built for survival, not for clarity. Patterns that served our ancestors well in a world that no longer exists, running constantly inside a world that demands something different entirely. This is what a book called The Power of Clear Thinking is really about. Not tips, not hacks, not morning routines or journal prompts. It is about something far more foundational, learning to see your own thinking from the outside, so that what feels obvious stops controlling you, and what is actually true has a chance to surface. It sounds simple. It is not. Here is a situation a lot of people find themselves in. You are working a decent job, $40,000, $50,000 a year, maybe more, stable, benefits, the kind of job your parents would have called secure. And yet every month feels like a negotiation. The credit card balance creeps, the savings account barely moves. You're not spending recklessly, but somehow there is always less than there should be. So you look at your coworker, same salary, same city, and they just bought a house. They seem fine, more than fine. And the story you tell yourself, the story that feels completely logical, is that they must have something you do not. A second income, an inheritance, a different kind of luck. What you almost never ask is, what am I not seeing about my own situation? This is one of the deepest problems with unclear thinking. It is not that we ignore reality. It is that we see a very specific slice of it, and then we fill in the rest with assumptions, with comparisons, with whatever story makes us feel like the situation makes sense. Psychologists call it the availability bias. Your mind defaults to whatever comes to mind most easily, the examples you have personally seen, the stories that felt vivid and close, not the full picture, not the statistical truth, just what is most accessible. And because your own situation is the most available thing of all, you start measuring everything against it. You see your struggle in sharp detail. You see other people's results without the details. and you draw conclusions that feel accurate, but are built almost entirely on incomplete information. This plays out in more places than just money. It shows up when you are comparing your progress to someone else's, when you assume something is common because you keep seeing it, when you feel like everyone else has figured it out and you are the only one still piecing things together. You are not seeing clearly. You are seeing what is closest to you and treating it like the full map. Here is something even harder to notice. Your mind does not just distort what you see, it protects what it already believes. This is not a personality flaw. It is not a sign of weakness. It is how the brain conserves energy. Once a belief is formed, once it has a shape, a history, a few confirming examples, the mind starts filtering incoming information to match it. If you believe you are bad at saving money, you will notice every moment you overspend. You will forget the months you were disciplined. You will tell yourself the story again. And the story will feel completely true because you have so much evidence for it. This is called confirmation bias, and it is not something that only happens to other people. It happens to every single person who has ever formed an opinion and then gone looking for evidence. The dangerous version of this is not the obvious kind, where you refuse to listen to someone who disagrees with you. The dangerous version is quieter. It is the way you frame a question before you even start looking for answers. The way you describe your problem to yourself already shapes which solutions you will notice. If you wake up and ask yourself, "Why does nothing ever work for me?" your brain will find answers to that question, not because they are true, because that was the question. If you ask instead, "What is one thing that actually has worked?" your brain will find answers to that question too. Same mind, same life, completely different information surfaces. Most people never change the question. They go deeper into the same inquiry, getting more and more detailed answers to something that was pointing in the wrong direction from the start. This is where things begin to shift, when you stop trusting that the question you are asking is the right one and start examining the question itself. Think about the last time you were absolutely certain about something. Not just pretty sure, certain. The kind of certain where the other possibility barely feels worth considering. Now think about how often that level of certainty has been wrong. There is a gap between confidence and accuracy, and in daily life that gap is enormous. But because the feeling of certainty and the feeling of being right feel identical inside your own head, the same warmth, the same solidity, most people never notice the difference until after. This is called the illusion of knowledge, and it is especially active in areas where we have partial understanding. You have read a few articles about the stock market, watched some YouTube videos, talked to a friend who made money on a trade, and now you have a feeling, a strong one, that you understand how it works well enough to act on it. That feeling is not knowledge. It is familiarity wearing the costume of expertise. The people who actually know a field deeply are usually the ones most aware of what they do not know. They've been wrong enough times in enough different ways that they developed a real relationship with uncertainty. They are less confident on the surface, but far more accurate underneath. The people with partial knowledge are the most dangerous, to themselves mostly. They have just enough information to feel certain and not enough experience to feel humble. I have seen this happen with business decisions, with relationship choices, with health. Someone reads enough to feel confident, acts on that confidence, and then stands in the wreckage wondering how they misread everything so completely. They did not misread the information, they misread the feeling. Here is something you have probably felt, but might not have named. It is that scattered, underwater feeling you get when too many things are unresolved at the same time. Not necessarily urgent things, not crises, just open things. The email you have not replied to, the decision you keep postponing, the conversation you'd need to have and keep moving around. None of them are emergencies, but together they create a kind of mental drag, a constant low-level hum in the background that pulls a small percentage of your cognitive energy all day, every day. And here is the hidden cost. It's not just that you feel tired, it's that the part of your brain responsible for clear, deliberate thinking, the part that weighs trade-offs, considers consequences, makes wise decisions, that part runs on a limited daily resource. And when it is depleted, you do not stop making decisions, you just make them differently, faster, more impulsively, more influenced by whatever feels right in the moment. This is why the same person who makes excellent decisions at 9 in the morning makes much worse ones at 9 at night. Not because they became less intelligent, because the cognitive resource that supports careful thinking was spent hours ago on emails, on minor choices, on all those open loops running quietly in the background. Clear thinking is not just about being smart, it's about protecting the conditions that make clear thinking possible. And most people never think about that. They try to think better by gathering more information, pushing harder, staying up later, all of which drains the exact resource they were trying to use.
Let me bring this together now, because I think something important is sitting here that is easy to miss if you look at each of these ideas separately. You are not struggling because you are not smart enough. You are not stuck because you lack information or discipline or motivation. Most of the people who feel stuck are not lacking any of those things. They are working with a mind that is doing exactly what minds were built to do, conserving energy, defaulting to familiar patterns, protecting existing beliefs, filtering reality through what is most available. It is not a malfunction, it is the design. But the design was built for a different world. A world where quick pattern recognition kept you alive, where trusting the group consensus was safer than thinking independently, where certainty was more useful than accuracy. You do not live in that world anymore. You live in one where the ability to think clearly, to question your own assumptions, to sit with uncertainty without jumping to conclusions, to ask whether the question itself is wrong, that is one of the rarest and most valuable skills a person can develop. And here's the part that no one really talks about. The people around you are mostly not doing this, not because they are bad people, because no one taught them to, because it is uncomfortable, because it feels like self-doubt, when really it is the opposite. It is the discipline of a mind that trusts itself enough to question itself. The person who cannot examine their own thinking is not confident, they're fragile. Their beliefs are only stable because they have never really been tested. The person who can see their thinking from the outside, who can catch themselves mid-assumption, mid-story, mid-confirmation, that person is genuinely free in a way that most people are not.
So here is the honest answer to the question we started with. Why do smart, thoughtful, hard-working people keep ending up in the same places? Because they were improving their thinking without ever examining the structure of their thinking. They were getting better at defending their conclusions, getting faster at finding evidence, getting more sophisticated at explaining why they are right. But the underlying machinery, the filters, the defaults, the stories, stayed exactly the same. Clear thinking is not about thinking more. It is about seeing the process itself. And the way you begin, the realistic way, not the idealized version, is smaller than you might expect. You start by noticing, not changing. You catch yourself in a strong feeling of certainty and ask, what am I assuming here? You make a decision and pause for one moment to ask, what would I need to believe for the opposite choice to make sense? You feel that familiar frustration, the same one that keeps showing up, and instead of acting on it, you ask, what story am I telling myself right now? That is it. That is the beginning. Not a new system, not a new routine, just the habit of introducing a half second of space between what you feel and what you conclude. It will not transform you overnight. Nothing honest ever does. But over time, that half second becomes a second. The second becomes a moment of genuine reflection, and the reflection starts catching things, errors, assumptions, old patterns you had completely stopped noticing because they felt like reality. This is not a quick fix. It is a slow renovation of the most important place you live, your own mind. And the people who do this work, not perfectly, not dramatically, but consistently, they do not become superhuman. They become clearer. And in a world running mostly on noise, that's rarer than any talent. There was a version of this you already knew. You felt it the last time a decision turned out differently than you expected, the last time a story you were telling yourself turned out to be incomplete, the last time you looked back and realized you had been looking at the wrong thing the whole time. You already knew that something was operating below the surface. Now you have a name for it and a few places to start looking. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, quite a lot. If this opened something up for you, the next one will probably take it even further.